First time I played with Arnold was 1958. Our competition started right there, the 17th green, and he walked over and put his arm around my shoulder, which he didn't have to do. I said, I've always had to fight Arnold's gallery, his army.
I am James, and this is Golf Relived. He betrayed me. Those are words you never expect to hear about Arnold Palmer, the beloved king of golf with the most loyal fans in sports history. But Jack Nicklaus said it. 3 specific times when Palmer crossed lines, Nicklaus never forgot. Palmer was charisma in golf shoes. He had Arnie's army, the smile, the swagger, and the working man image. The whole world loved him. But Nicklaus saw something else, 3 moments that felt like betrayal, and each one changed how Jack played the game forever. Quick favor, if you want to help this video blow up, hit the hype feature and give it some hype while we get into what Jack says really happened. Palmer and Nicklaus played together, traveled together, and built the modern game together. On the surface, they were friends. But inside the ropes, something darker was brewing, a competition that went beyond scores and trophies. These were not just competitive moments. Nicklaus felt these were deliberate acts, strategies designed to break him mentally and keep him in his place. And the crazy part is, Palmer never had to apologize because the public never saw it the way Jack did. The rivalry between these 2 legendary men made golf into a global television spectacle. It turned ordinary weekend warriors into passionate fanatics. But the cost was high. Both men paid for it in lost tournaments, damaged pride, and a relationship that only became real friendship after the war was over. Let's break down the 3 times Nicklaus says Palmer betrayed him, starting with the one that lasted the longest. Number 3. The rivalry that destroyed both. The mutual obsession. This betrayal was not a single moment. It was a pattern that repeated for years. Nicklaus and Palmer entered tournaments as co-leaders, and instead of playing the course, they played each other. They turned stroke play into a private match play duel, and the rest of the field just walked past them to collect the trophy. Nicklaus admitted it himself. He said they competed against each other with total intent to beat each other, and they ended up beating each other's brains out while the rest of the field just passed them. That is not a casual comment. That is a confession. Here is how it worked. Both men would be at the top of the leaderboard going into the final round. The smart play would be to focus on the course, stay steady, and post a low number. But they did not do that. They became obsessed with what the other guy was doing. If Palmer made birdie, Nicklaus felt he had to answer. If Nicklaus pulled ahead, Palmer would take wild risks to catch up. The result was chaos. Final round scores of 73, 74, 75, numbers that had no business coming from 2 of the best players in history. They would finish their rounds, shake hands, and only then realize they had both lost to some third player who stayed calm and played smart golf. This happened again and again. In multiple tournaments during the mid-1960s, they entered as favorites and left as footnotes. Players like Billy Casper and Julius Boros, solid pros who should not have been beating the big 3, kept sneaking into winners' circles because Palmer and Nicklaus were too busy trying to humiliate each other. The 1966 US Open at Olympic Club is the perfect example. Palmer had a 7-shot lead with 9 holes to play. He should have coasted. Instead, the pressure of the Nicklaus age dawning made him desperate. He went for broke, trying to secure one last major to prove he was still the king. His aggressive style, the same slash and burn approach he used to intimidate Nicklaus back in 1958, finally betrayed him. Billy Casper won. Palmer collapsed. Nicklaus was not even a factor. After rounds like that, Nicklaus and Palmer would go to dinner together and ask each other, "What did we do today?" They knew they had messed up. They knew they let ego and rivalry destroy their own chances. But they could not stop. The obsession was too strong. This mutual destruction is why neither man reached his theoretical maximum of PGA Tour wins during their prime. Gary Player, the 3rd member of the Big 3, quietly racked up 9 majors while the 2 Americans were busy trying to beat each other's brains out. Player was the 3rd man in, the guy who benefited when Nicklaus and Palmer turned golf into personal warfare. The numbers tell the story. In 1962, Palmer won 7 tournaments, while Nicklaus won 3. By 1965, Nicklaus had 5 wins to Palmer's 1. The shift was happening. But during the peak battle years of 1963 and 1964, both men were so focused on each other that their win totals suffered compared to what they should have been. Tournament organizers loved it. Fans loved it. But from a pure competitive standpoint, it was professional malpractice. They were not playing to win, they were playing to not lose to each other. There is a difference, and it cost them both. Nicklaus called this a betrayal because it was a betrayal of their own self-interest. By prioritizing the humiliation of the other over the securing of the trophy, they opened the door for competitors who had no business winning. It was professional negligence driven by pure ego. The late 1960s Citrus Open, the tournament that would later become the Arnold Palmer Invitational, saw this pattern repeat. Both men locked in a battle of wills, both faded in the final round, and some field player walked away with the win. It was embarrassing, it was costly, and it was entirely their fault. This betrayal lasted longer than any single tournament. It was a years-long pattern of self-sabotage, and Nicklaus knew it. He hated losing to Palmer, but he hated losing to the field even more. The rivalry that made golf famous also made both men vulnerable, and they paid the price in championships that should have been theirs. Number 2. The 1962 U.S. Open at Oakmont. The weaponization of Arnie's army. This is the betrayal that Nicklaus felt most personally. Oakmont Country Club in western Pennsylvania was Palmer country. The gallery was not just pro-Palmer, they were anti-Nicklaus. And Palmer, the so-called gentleman, did nothing to stop it. This was Nicklaus's first professional major. He was 22 years old, playing in front of a hostile mob that wanted him to fail. They called him Fat Jack and Ohio Fatty. They cheered when he missed putts. They made noise during his backswing. A marshal at the 18th green said, "It's Arnold's Open. Look at that gallery die," as if Nicklaus winning would be a tragedy. Nicklaus later said he always had to fight Arnold's gallery, his army. He noted that Arnold was a gentleman and a friend, but the fans were a factor he had to overcome internally. That is a polite way of saying Palmer let his fans turn into a mob, and he did nothing to control them. Palmer admitted later he was a little embarrassed by the crowd's behavior, but embarrassed is not enough. During the heat of the competition, when the hostility was at its worst, Palmer stayed silent. He did not hush the crowd. He did not appeal for fairness. He let the army function as a psychological weapon, an unofficial hazard that Nicklaus had to navigate. The playoff was brutal. An 18-hole showdown on Sunday, the 17th of June 1962. Nicklaus shot 71, Palmer shot 74, but the real story was the mental battle. Nicklaus built a 4-stroke lead after 6 holes. The crowd went from loud to desperate. They were trying to will Palmer back into the tournament, and their hostility toward Nicklaus reached a fever pitch. The gallery packed the entire 18th green hours before the final groups arrived. They were not there to watch golf, they were there to see their king reclaim his throne. When Nicklaus made pars and Palmer made bogeys, the silence was deafening. When Palmer made a rare birdie, the roar could be heard across the entire course. This was not normal fan behavior, this was tribal warfare. Oakmont became a battlefield, and Nicklaus was the invader fighting against an entire army with nothing but his clubs and his will. Palmer, 3, putted 10 times during the entire tournament. 10. For a player of his caliber, that is a statistical anomaly. It shows the emotional weight of his own army was crushing him. The crowd wanted Palmer to win so badly that it became a burden he could not carry. The 13th hole was the turning point. Palmer made another bogey, his 10th 3-putt of the week. His chances died right there. Nicklaus stayed calm, stayed focused, and won his first major in one of the most hostile environments in golf history. Here is the betrayal. Palmer could have stepped in. He could have asked the gallery to respect both players. He could have reminded them that golf is a gentleman's game, but he did not. He let the hostility build because it helped him, or at least he thought it did. In the end, it hurt both of them. Palmer collapsed under the pressure his own fans created, and Nicklaus learned he could never trust a crowd again. Nicklaus turned that hostility into fuel. He built a mental bunker, a shield that protected him for the next 2 decades. He realized if he could not have the love of the fans, he would have the records that made their love irrelevant. Oakmont taught him that. Palmer's embarrassed silence taught him that. This betrayal shaped Nicklaus into the cold, focused winner he became. He never forgot what it felt like to play in front of a mob that wanted him to fail, and he never forgot that Palmer could have stopped it, but chose not to. Number 1. The 1958 Athens Country Club encounter. The first betrayal. This is where it all started. The 25th of September 1958, Athens Country Club in southeastern Ohio. An exhibition match for Dow Finsterwald Day. Palmer was the reigning reigning Masters champion, the leading money winner, and the king of golf. Nicklaus was an 18-year-old amateur with raw talent and a big future. The match started with a driving contest on the first hole, a par 4 about 330 to 335 yards. Palmer, famous for his Popeye forearms and aggressive swing, drove the green. It was a power move, designed to intimidate, but Nicklaus responded by driving over the green, beyond 335 yards. He outdrove the king. For a moment, the hierarchy was challenged. Palmer's identity as the ultimate power hitter was threatened by a kid who hit it farther, but Palmer was not about to let that stand. He used the rest of the round to re-establish dominance. Palmer shot a course record 62, 8 birdies and an eagle. Nicklaus shot a solid 68. Then came the betrayal. Instead of offering encouragement or professional courtesy, Palmer went out of his way to point out the scorecard. He was quick to remind Nicklaus that while he lost the driving contest, he beat him by 4 shots where it mattered most, on the final card that goes in the record books. This was not mentorship, this was suppression. A secure champion would have praised the 18-year-old's drive and maybe offered some advice. Palmer chose to use the scorecard as a weapon to invalidate the kid's moment of brilliance. Nicklaus never forgot that. It set the tone for the entire relationship. Palmer was not going to be a mentor. He was going to be a predator, using every tool available to keep Nicklaus in his place. The scorecard, the crowd, the endorsements, everything was fair game. This 1,958 encounter was psychological preemption. Palmer recognized Nicklaus's potential immediately and decided the best defense was to crush his confidence early. It was a betrayal of the amateur-professional dynamic, a betrayal of the mentorship role that champions usually embrace. But it backfired. Instead of breaking Nicklaus, it motivated him. Jack realized he was in a fight, not a friendship. He built his game around the need to beat Palmer, to prove the scorecard meant nothing if you could not win the majors that mattered. The institutional side of the betrayal came later. Both men were represented by Mark McCormack's IMG agency, but Palmer was the first client, the golden boy with charisma and common man appeal. Nicklaus felt he was getting short shrift, managed as a secondary asset despite his superior major championship record. The favoritism was clear from the start. Palmer got the Wilson endorsements, the Heinz ketchup ads, the TV deals. Nicklaus got labeled the villain, the mechanical intruder with a chubby amateur image. McCormack admitted Palmer was getting all the adulation while Nicklaus was a Tier 2 asset in the agency's eyes. When Nicklaus left IMG to represent himself, McCormack was not kind. He suggested Nicklaus was blaming the agency for his own lack of personality, his appearance, attitude, and upbringing. That was the final insult. The agency supposed to represent Nicklaus's interests was critiquing him to justify why the king was getting better deals. Nicklaus rejected that narrative. He built the Golden Bear brand, proved that trophies matter more than adulation, and eventually surpassed Palmer in every category that counted. But the bitterness remained. These 3 betrayals, the 1,958 scorecard, the 1,962 gallery, and the years of mutual obsession, were not just personal grievances. They were the structural components of a rivalry that shaped modern golf. Palmer used every cultural and institutional advantage to maintain his throne. Nicklaus used every scorecard to dismantle it. The betrayals were not accidents. They were calculated moves in a psychological war where only one man could be king. Palmer needed the roar of the crowd to sustain his game. Nicklaus needed the silence of focus to build his legacy. By 1969, the mutual destruction era was over. Nicklaus's dominance was clear. Palmer's tour winds dried up. The Big Three became a marketing concept, not a competitive reality. Nicklaus won 18 majors to Palmer's 7. The gap was not close. But the cost was real. Palmer's decline after 1964 and Nicklaus's years as the villain were the direct results of a rivalry that was never as friendly as the commercials suggested. The scars of Athens, Oakmont, and the brains-out battles remain. In later years, they became genuine friends. They could shake hands and ask what time you want to go to dinner. But during the 1960s, inside the ropes, their relationship was a high-stakes psychological war. Palmer used every available advantage. Nicklaus used every scorecard. The betrayals taught Nicklaus mental toughness. Oakmont forced him to build a mental bunker. The commercial slights forced him to become a businessman. The mutual obsession taught him the cost of losing focus. Palmer's role was to provide the charisma and the crowd. Nicklaus's role was to provide the standard of competence that eventually eclipsed the personality-driven era. The The betrayals were the gift Palmer gave his rival, the gift of an enemy worth defeating. Golf today owes much to this friction. Had Palmer been a welcoming mentor, Nicklaus might never have developed the killer instinct necessary to win 18 majors. Had the gallery not been hostile at Oakmont, Nicklaus might not have learned to tune out the world. The betrayals were valuable lessons disguised as insults. The 1973 Bob Hope Desert Classic showed the pattern still existed. Palmer, 43 and near the end, beat both Nicklaus and Johnny Miller by 2 shots for his last tour win. Even in their 40s, the presence of the other on the leaderboard was enough to wound their focus. The obsession never fully died. The Big Three myth was just that, a myth. Nicklaus's major total doubled Palmer's and Players combined. The marketing remained skewed toward Palmer, but the trophies told the truth. Nicklaus was the greatest, and Palmer knew it. Respect both men. Palmer brought the crowds and the television cameras. Nicklaus brought the standard. Together, they turned golf from a country club pastime into a global sport. But the rivalry was real, the betrayals were real, and the cost was real. The lessons are clear. Pressure reveals character. Ego can destroy even the most talented. Rivalry, when handled with ruthless focus, can push you to greatness. And sometimes, the enemy you need is the one who refuses to be your friend. Jack Nicklaus named 3 betrayals. The 1,958 scorecard that set the tone, the 1,962 gallery that tested his will, and the years of mutual obsession that cost both men tournaments they should have won. Each betrayal made him stronger. Each one proved Palmer was not just the king, he was a competitor who played to win by any means necessary. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and let me know which golf legends you want to hear about next. The game has always been tougher than it looks, and the history is full of battles the cameras never caught.